Never did I realize that that was going to be the last time I would talk to her.
After a night of partying, a young woman drives towards home. The night swallows her up without a trace. Frantic parents pray for her return.
It was like my world came to an end.
Years later, a woman feels a strange vibe.
She just felt something was drawing her to that truck.
Sometimes when a prayer is answered, it's a killer's worst nightmare. "23-year-old Denise Huber lives in Newport Beach with her parents and brother.
Newport Beach is probably one of the best places to live in probably the world, I think. The climate, the people were good. It's a laid-back community.
Denise plans to go to an alt-indie rock concert with a young man she'd been seeing for about 6 months, Stephen Horrocks, when there's a change of plans.
He had to work, and so Rob was going to go with her. And Rob was a good friend of Steve's and a good friend of Denise's also.
So she's going to swing by and pick him up.
She was excited about going. She said, "I'll probably be home late." And I said, "Well, don't be too late, because we, always worry." When she left, she said goodbye and "I love you," and she was gone. Never did I realize that that was going to be the last time I would talk to her.
They park at the Los Angeles Forum at approximately 8 p.m., getting, as Calvert says, partied up before the concert. During the concert, Calvert and Denise share a 20-ounce glass of beer.
Denise and Robert leave the concert sometime between 11 and 11:30 p.m. They enter her car and proceed to a bar.
They had some drinks and I don't know, maybe 2 in the morning when she dropped him off.
When Denise drops Calvert back to his residence in Huntington Beach, she doesn't appear drunk. It's 2:05 a.m. when she pulls away and heads home, driving southbound on Highway 73 through Costa Mesa. The next morning, the Hubers noticed Denise didn't come home that night, but they aren't overly concerned.
That wasn't a big deal. She was 23 years old.
About 6 p.m., Ion Huber calls Denise's best friend, Tammy Brown, who was not seen or heard from Denise either. Brown calls other friends in an attempt to locate her, but has no luck.
Her friend Tammy actually went out and drove around and found her car, and then she called us. Then we went up and found the car also. It was really not that far from where we live, and it had a flat tire, but she wasn't there. So then the whole mystery began.
Denise's car is on Highway 73, north of the Highway 55 turnoff to Newport Beach.
I opened the door, went in it. Everything was dead from the flashers that she had left on.
There was skid marks from the car. There was no keys, there was hosiery on the seat, and no sign of her.
We contacted the police. That was the trigger.
This wasn't a wait 24-hour situation. They reacted immediately.
They did go into a missing code right away. We knew that she wouldn't just take off.
The area is scoured. The canine unit can trace Denise's scent for no more than 75 yards from her car.
They put helicopters up searching with infrared, and they were circling, and we could hear them from our house. And that's the most awful thing in the world, to know what they're looking for. They were looking for a body, and Ione and I were on our knees praying that night.
And unfortunately, the police can still find no trace of Denise Huber.
Investigators meet with the Hubers for an interview.
They just asked a lot of questions. Did we have any enemies? A lot of things that they were going to have to look into, but really there were no answers.
They want to find out more about her and what her actions were, and if runaway was a possibility or if she's actually missing.
But Denise does not seem like the kind of person to run away.
You go back and trace everything that you can find that they did. Robert was with her in the car, so he would be interviewed by the police.
Most homicides are committed by someone you know or someone you're acquainted with.
I did not suspect Rob at all. I know the police have to do that. They have to question everybody. In my mind, he was not a suspect.
Robert Calvert passes a polygraph test. Now, her boyfriend, Stephen, would have been a natural suspect as well, but his alibi checks out. All signs point to an abduction by someone Denise didn't know.
She did everything right. When she got the flat tires, she pulled over, turned the flashers on.
You get flustered, doesn't know what to do, and started to proceed to a phone or something down the road that she knew was there.
When someone is abducted, time is of the essence. Those first 24 to 48 hours are critical. So Denise's parents are frantically searching for that one precious clue that could help them find their daughter.
We had a lot of flyers printed up and posted all over, and even sent to other states, to other police departments all over the country. We had a banner put up in the area where the car was found.
That banner was, I think, about 6 feet wide and about 30 feet long. And we posted it on the side of an apartment building right where her car was found. We felt that somebody must have seen something.
The Hubers rent a plane, towing a banner that asks for the public help and offers a $10,000 reward. The case draws the attention of the media.
We did not try and block the media. The media was our friend. They were in our house many, many times. And this was LA TV, it wasn't just local. And they said, if you're doing anything at all, call us, we'll come in.
They were very good with us. They wanted to keep the story alive, and we appreciated that.
And they would get her picture out. That was the main thing, get her picture out, because that would help us find her. And a lot of people felt this was their daughter too. We sold a lot of cell phones for companies. People bought cell phones for their kids. We asked that they travel safer. People said that you gotta look at some good coming out of a bad situation.
Willing to try anything in his quest to find his daughter, Dennis turns his car into a literal rolling billboard.
I'd stop and talk to people, I'd give out flyers.
In cases like this, there will be all kinds of responses from the public.
We acted on some weird leads. Somebody thought he knew something. He went to somebody and they turned it into the police because they wanted to talk to this guy that said he knew something. And finally this guy turned himself in and he knew nothing. He was just a crackpot.
They did get a lot of calls. They followed up on a lot of leads, which really led to nowhere.
That lead investigator stays in permanent contact with the family.
It was very helpful, especially at the beginning. The detective that was on the case would call us every day, every night, and just let us know what had happened during that day. They were all so supportive, and we knew they were wanting to help, and were doing everything they could.
Police stake out the freeway where they know Denise was last seen with her car. and identified drivers by taking pictures of their license plates. They then contacted the drivers to ask if anyone had seen anything suspicious on the night of June 2nd.
The police up to this point have done the job as best they can. Normally, an investigator stays in a job function for X number of months or years, and there's a transfer cycle for police. So for that lead investigator to be reassigned after a year is normal police procedure.
The Hubers are left in a state of suspense, unable to think of anything but Denise.
They ask members of their church to help them through prayer.
People never give up hope. You start thinking of all the positive things that could have happened and that she's still alive.
There were a lot of people praying for an answer. We didn't specify what the answer was going to be.
The disappearance of Denise Huber will not stay a mystery forever. "23-year-old Denise Huber never makes it home after the party.
Initially, everybody's a suspect.
They did get a lot of calls. They followed up on a lot of leads, which really led to nowhere.
The case goes cold, but Denise Huber is not forgotten. Denise Annette Huber is born November 22nd, 1967, in Modesto, California.
She was a very easy child to raise. She didn't give us any trouble, really. Good grades.
She graduates high school at Los Angeles Baptist in 1985 and receives her bachelor's degree in social sciences from the University of California at Irvine in 1990.
Denise is working as a waitress and a store clerk when she disappeared, but she was planning for a career, probably something in the social sciences industry. She had a really close bond with her parents, especially her father.
I was very, very close to her, and it's a father-daughter thing. We would get real close, so close that once a week, she and I would go to breakfast just by ourselves. She could tell me if she was having problems in school or anything for that week. I look back on that, and it's special.
Just a day or two before Denise disappears, she leaves a note on her dad's computer that reads, "Hi Dad, I love you, have a great day, love Denise."
3 years pass since Denise Huber disappears into thin air.
Denise's parents decide to leave California.
We were packing to move back to North Dakota because I couldn't take it anymore. Everything was just dark to me. So we were packing and we asked people, would you please pray for an answer?
There was an answer to their prayers from a bizarre location.
Elaine Canalia and Jack Court sell paint supplies at a swap meet in Prescott Valley, Arizona.
They talked to this fellow, John Familaro, who was selling paint and paint products and so forth. And there was something that they wanted, and he said he didn't have it there, but he had it at his house. So he had them follow him to his house.
It was in an upscale area. It was littered with paint cans, a rental vehicle parked with a cord running to it from the house, and the woman that went there to get some paint samples from this guy sparked her interest.
She just felt something was drawing her to that truck.
She took the license plate down.
She was astute enough a few days later to provide it to a friend of hers who worked in law enforcement to follow up on it. Just check this out.
They found out then that that truck had been stolen from California. And so they went to check on it, and that's how the whole story broke open.
Being a border state with Mexico, a lot of drugs were coming up from Mexico. We formed a multi-agency narcotics task force just to involve all of the agencies within Yavapai County. This task force would primarily focus that time on the methamphetamine labs that were pretty popular. They'd be smaller labs, mobile labs, motorhomes, travel trailers, those kind of things that could just go out into public lands and set up. They'd received a tip from a lady who was from Phoenix.
A deputy is dispatched to the scene of the stolen truck.
The deputy's job at that time was take that stolen vehicle into his custody. He needed to inventory whatever might be in it, just document the condition and the overall aspect of the vehicle. It was also interesting that he noted an electric cord ran into the vehicle. It looked somewhat suspicious as a possible meth lab. So we went ahead and called the narcotics team to go on out there and take a look at it.
Officers work their way through the hull of the stolen truck, moving toward a freezer at the back, running from the extension cord.
It was primarily products related to painting, thinners and various things, but they did have to open the freezer, which was locked. And so a locksmith was called to open the freezer. This was a large chest freezer. And inside was some plastic garbage bags that obviously had something in them. The detective laid hands on the bags. He believed he felt a shoulder. He felt pretty confident that there was a body in there. So we sent some of the homicide guys out. I went out as well. We cut open the bags and examined what was in it, and it was a body. The hands and arms behind her back, handcuffed. I remember the very manicured fingernails. Usually when you have a dead, naked female, it's sex crime related. But I also remember that some fluids were frozen in the bottom of the cooler. And what I remember was the offset of the color from the white inside of the freezer to red, blood-looking fluids that was also frozen. You have a frozen body. Who is this? Where did they come from? What's going on? Is there more bodies? But our medical examiner and their lab really didn't have the tools and the forensics that I was hoping to get done with what was going on.
A frozen body can be in near perfect condition and still not be much help in answering our questions. It may have been frozen and thawed, causing tissue damage, and decomposition can set in.
The best thing to do here was just get the truck to a secured location that has the capability with the forensic science to go through it all.
They would obtain a subsequent search warrant for the house and in all probability separate and detain the occupants of that house once they located them.
Attempts were made knocking on the neighbors' doors, asking. I recall someone saying that he had left. They believed with his mother earlier in the day, and maybe he was still gone.
This is John J. Familero's residence. He's an Arizona contractor, but his license was revoked in May for poor workmanship and unpaid wages.
When that officer arrives and he finds the plug-in plugged into the neighboring home, which is owned by the mother, now you have two possible suspects.
So we're securing the residence. We didn't want this person just walking up on us, so I called in more patrol deputies to set up an outer perimeter, watching the roads for the vehicle we identified they were in.
At approximately 5:30 p.m., John Familero and his mother Ann pull up. And police are waiting.
We separated them, told them that we had seized the truck as a stolen vehicle. He didn't say a word to me.
Denise Huber was our daughter. She was a very easy child to raise.
She's been missing for 3 years. when a body is found.
The hands and arms behind her back, handcuffed. Usually when you have a dead, naked female, it's sex crime related.
We were packing to move back to North Dakota. We asked people, would you please pray for an answer?
It's an answer to a prayer when the mystery finally begins to unravel.
The thing about working homicides is you see all kinds of stuff. Someone would come across a body in the desert that disappeared 2 years before. The desert's a very dry environment, so you would have the body somewhat preserved and mummified almost. But to have someone frozen and kept in their possession was just something you don't see.
The suspect and his mother arrive home and are immediately surrounded.
We had an inner perimeter at the house, and then the truck was being taken to Phoenix. That's kind of what it looked like at that time. Now there's probably close to 8, 9 people there. I had called our investigators from the county attorney's office, and they actually sent a prosecutor just to come out in firsthand who would be assigned the case.
They arrest Familaro, they separate the mother from him.
We took John to the sheriff's office to interview room where he was videotaped, told him he was under arrest for the stolen vehicle. I told him, I need to talk to you about the body and the vehicle. And he basically invoked his rights and wanted an attorney and really didn't want to say anything to me. He was charged and booked into the county jail. The initial charges, I believe, were stolen vehicle and homicide.
The body is in such a state inside that freezer that identification is going to prove difficult.
I do recall before that truck left, I did a look over of the body, and it looked to me as though there was a lot of trauma surrounding the head. So I felt that we needed a forensic anthropologist as well, and she was more than willing to help.
Once they move the truck and have established that there's a body in that freezer, now they can proceed with the full legal procedure of a search warrant.
We start to systematically go through the residence room by room. You photograph everything before you pick it up and touch it or seize it, take it into your custody. You have to describe in a search warrant the items in particular that you're looking for. What I also found in the house was underneath the home, Familaro had moved a tremendous amount of earth from underneath that house and created this dark, dirt-floored room underneath the house that had stuff in it. So it was just bizarre. So we just continued to search. We just took our time and worked for days on it. We really weren't sure what we were looking for. We had assigned a handful of detectives to individual rooms to just systematically go through very carefully. And I had ended up in the garage, and high up on a shelf, or maybe midway up on a shelf in the garage, was something you commonly see, boxes, but these boxes were marked Christmas. And I remember pulling them down and opening them up and just being shocked. Inside one of the boxes, I began to see some bloody clothing. Well, what appeared to be dried blood. I found a hammer, which again appeared to have dried blood. It also looked like some body tissue. I remember finding in there a pry bar. You see those pry bars you pry nails with. It as well appeared to have dried blood and tissue on it. I remember finding some high heel pump shoes, a purse with identification. That, I think, was the big break for identifying the victim. Those boxes went back to our evidence lab where Our forensic evidence person began to examine these things, and the driver's license was to a young lady named Denise Huber. There was also a thumbprint on the license. It was out of California. There were other things in there, credit cards, you know, basically a young lady's purse with all the belongings in it. I also called the Costa Mesa Police Department, told them the name and what we were doing, and they were just shocked that name even came up. I couldn't tell if that was her or not. With the frozen body, I didn't get that good enough a look at the face, but I felt pretty confident that this was going to be our victim. And so our fingerprint expert, Mike Winnie, called down and talked to Boo Holst and said, we think we know who she is and we got a thumbprint. And she said, well, it's getting close to me getting fingerprints, but you got the expert, send him down. So I sent Mike down to Phoenix to get the fingerprints off the body. And one of the other detectives and I went through all the items there, laid them out, photographed them, what have you, and got them ready to go to our state crime lab to start checking for DNA and various things, because I was very confident that that was blood. I remember the doctor telling me she'd never had a body completely frozen like this, and it was kind of in an on-your-knees, curled-up position.
When a frozen body is our only clue to solving a mystery, it has to be handled very delicately. It can't be thawed too quickly or with any kind of fluid exposure, like you can't submerge it in warm water to thaw it. A hairdryer is used on Denise's frozen fingers, and they were able to get fingerprints.
I actually remembered it being on TV, Denise Huber missing. And then I realized, oh my gosh, that's who we have. So I was glad that we found her. It was a horrible, violent ending, but the family now was being notified, and I think their worst case fears were being realized. You can't imagine what they went through with this, but they were notified as well once we had the positive ID.
They came to our house. When I saw all three of them coming, the police detectives, I just had a feeling they've got an answer. And they did. And they told us what had happened and where she had been found.
And I felt up until she was found that we would find her alive. I just had that belief. I know I was wrong. And that ended when they found her. It was like my world came to an end.
We knew there was not ever any chance. I had pretty much accepted that myself already, that deep down I just kind of knew Denise was gone. But now it was for sure. That was hard, of course. To me, it was better to know than to be just wondering and wondering all this time.
The family learns that Denise is found frozen in a semi-fetal position. Her hands have been handcuffed behind her back, she's been gagged, and she's got duct tape wrapped around her face from her eyes to her mouth. Cause of death is from multiple skull fractures caused by blunt force trauma. It's determined that she's received at least 31 blows. Degraded sperm cells are found in the rectal swabs taken from her body. She's been sexually assaulted.
The Hubers believe that Elaine's hunch was actually God's intervention to help them find their daughter. They offer her the $10,000 reward, but she refuses, and she gives her condolences instead.
Investigators from California join investigators from Arizona with a common goal: justice for Denise Huber.
They need to find out more about the suspect, John Familaro.
Familaro is born to Anne and Angelo Familaro in Long Island, New York on June 10, 1957. He is the youngest of three, with a brother and sister. Their mother bullies and intimidates them. She hoards stacks of newspapers, magazines, food, laundry, and more. As a child, Familaro is weak, sick, and picked on at school. His moods swing from depression to hyperactivity. Like his mother, he hoards stacks of books, papers, and magazines in his room.
His mother, Anne, punishes both boys by whipping them and bathed them until they were well into their teens.
After some family turmoil, Familero's family moves to Prescott, Arizona. But John heads to California and, after being evicted from his apartment, ends up living in a storage locker he had rented when he first arrived. From there, he starts a painting business. Much to the dismay of the Huber family, they would drive by the storage locker almost every day, a place where their loved one's body was possibly kept for the years that they were looking for her.
He had previous girlfriends that he had handcuffed. He's obviously into some form of bondage.
One girlfriend threatens to charge him with date rape, but they reconcile and become engaged in early 1991.
In June 1991, John's life was spinning out of control. His engagement ended when his fiancée dumped him, and his sister also remembers a strange call where he phoned her crying about something that happened years before.
This is not a normal person.
Found the receipt for the freezer, where he purchased it, when he purchased it, where he had it delivered, receipts for storage sheds, and that's one of the focuses we had right away when we found that evidence is we need to get over there and look at these storage facilities, at where he had these multiple storage sheds rented. Because the freezer was delivered there maybe 8 or 9 days after Denise disappeared.
Investigators from both jurisdictions agree. Although Familero hasn't occupied the Laguna Hills warehouse for years, they need to return to Orange County, California, and investigate his former rental for themselves. Even though Denise Huber's body is found in a freezer on John Familero's property, he denies murdering her. Police return to the Laguna Hills warehouse he rented during the time of her disappearance to look for evidence.
When he left that facility, the cleaning staff saw red paint on the floor in their mind and then cleaned it up. The thing about paint, you can clean it up. Blood does not clean up. It stains and it shows up on scopes and graphs after the fact.
We used a chemical called luminol, which will glow if it detects blood. And we ended up having drywall removed from the walls of this storage shed. And there was so much blood that had gone under the drywall and soaked up into the 2x4s and the other wood and drywall that anyone losing that amount of blood would have more than likely not survived.
No one will ever know what transpired that evening.
Denise Huber and her friend, Robert Calvert, go to a concert and make a night out of it. She drops him off at 2 a.m. and heads home to Newport Beach. Her car gets a flat tire and she pulls over to the shoulder of the highway and puts on her hazard lights. It seems possible that Denise gets out of her car to go use a nearby emergency call box.
He probably picked her up very soon after the flat tire. He looks unassuming, he offers her a ride. Once the suspect has picked Denise up, he obviously has to render her unconscious in some manner.
The hammer was used at the abduction. The nail bar was used at another location for the killing itself. It's just day by day these things come up, and you're able to sit down with some pretty good detectives and doctors, attorneys, prosecutors who specifically want certain things. If the evidence shows that, did this happen? Did that happen? How do you know this? Where's the evidence? There was no assumptions. The evidence took you in that direction is what every day would do. As a parent, I can't imagine it. It had to be your worst nightmare. Very, very difficult.
The heels of Huber's dress shoes show severe scraping. and one rubber heel cap is completely removed, making it likely Famularo drags her unconscious body from his vehicle into his storage unit.
Famularo strips off Huber's clothes, handcuffs her, sodomizes her, and then wraps 3 plastic bags around her head to minimize blood splatter. His weapon strikes Huber in the head with such force that pieces of white plastic are found embedded in her skull.
Did he keep her alive for 8 days, whatever it was? I don't know if we could ever prove that. I think he kept her alive for a little while. Could have been a day or 2 or 3, possibly.
The receipt for the freezer is issued on June the 10th. A few days later, he submits for a private contract for hydro to a storage facility.
I think Denise was killed there at that storage shed and then was put into the freezer. So jurisdiction was more properly handled out of the California court system, and that's where we ended up going with it. I heard stories of him living in storage sheds, and I didn't realize, but it's not uncommon for people to live in storage sheds in some of these larger urban areas.
And we drove by that facility within 2 blocks every Sunday. We went going to church.
The search of Famularo's Arizona home reveals he possesses newspapers and videotape containing stories about Huber's disappearance.
He had tapes of us asking for an answer.
Identification of other women are found in his belongings. Authorities confirm that many of the women are safe, but it is possible that Famularo has killed others. John J. Famularo waives extradition and is transported from Prescott, Arizona, back to the scene of the crime in Orange County, California. The trial date approaches.
Under California state law, when you combine sodomy with murder, it qualifies you, if convicted, to suffer the death penalty.
The police were so good in what they did. Our police and Arizona police were fantastic.
Famularo is originally held on $250,000 bail, but that is revoked when prosecutors argue that the crime is depraved and that there might be other victims. Famularo, who refuses to discuss anything with the police, does not testify at his trial. He pleads not guilty.
He's never opened his mouth to me, and I don't want to hear from him. I hear from his defense attorneys when we were going through the case. They gave the best defense they could give, but that was their job.
They really had no defense. They were just trying to keep him from the death penalty.
Having interviewed his previous girlfriends, and the pattern of his activity during sexual encounters shows violence, intimidation, handcuffing. That is key to piecing together that he is a violent, disturbed individual.
During his trial, it comes out that John had been molested and bullied as a child, but it takes the jury only hours to reach their verdict.
I didn't want to go to it first. I'm so glad I was there. It was so one-sided, there was no defense. Everything the prosecution presented just nailed him with DNA and everything. It was therapeutic to me. Both of us had a chance to give our witness statements and look him in the eye, which he kind of tried to hide behind, but I sat behind him all the trial. It was really, really tough. We couldn't breathe. I don't think anybody around us, all of our friends were there every day in the trial supporting us.
On May 22, 1997, a jury unanimously convicts John Famularo of murder, sodomy, and kidnapping.
The jury nailed it. They came back in 2 hours with the guilty verdict.
On September 6, 1997, Famularo is formally sentenced to death by Judge John Ryan and moved to death row at San Quentin Penitentiary.
At least he's locked up. He's not free to hurt somebody else. We were just appreciative. I mean, we very much appreciative. We had prayed for that to go well, and it really did.
Robert Calvert, Denise's good friend she spent her last evening with, finally gets the answers he needs too.
I remember feeling pretty bad for that young man because I think in his own mind, he knew people suspected him, and he always claimed his innocence. And so I think for him, this was huge closure. I was glad to see that happen for that young man because I'm sure there were people who felt he was involved somehow, and this cleared him of that. Hindsight, we all have it. Should've, would've, could've. It's something we all think back about, and I'm sure it's haunted him. I'm not a behavioral psychologist, psychiatrist, what have you, for why would someone keep a body for at least 3 years? Was it a trophy? I know there were discussions with professionals who looked at certain behavior of people. He was a hoarder. That was apparent within the house. But why would you keep a naked female body that you brutally murdered in your possession in your driveway in a stolen truck?
And one woman, Elaine Canalia, is responsible for bringing about justice for Denise Huber.
God bless that lady for calling it in. And she just didn't feel right about it. And I wish more people would do that. You always have to look out for each other as a community, as a neighborhood, as a neighbor. And if you see something suspicious or you see something that isn't right, report it. You could save a life, you could truly help someone. It's not crying wolf. We need more of that. And the more of that, the better in these small, rural, tight-knit communities like that was, where this came to be.